What on earth is happening with Ethereum? It's one of the worst performers this week. It went down more than Bitcoin, more than Solana. The question is this potentially an opportunity? Let's have a look at some on-chain data, some metrics most people are not considering. Now, it's always interesting to see what's happening with the short-term bets on the price. So to look at the derivatives market. Because when the funding rates are extremely negative, so when the shorts have to pay the longs, when people bet on falling prices, it tends to be a bottom in the market. Most of the time on the perpetual futures, the longs have to pay the shorts, so it costs money to be more exposed to Ethereum, but sometimes people are rather pessimistic. When everybody bets on falling prices, we tend to see a local bottom. When everybody bets on rising prices, we tend to see a local top. Currently, the market is somewhat balanced. We are neither super high nor super low in the funding rates. For the long-term trend, it seems like the tokenomics of Ethereum have improved. So the circulating supply of Ethereum isn't growing that much anymore because Ethereum is getting staked again. This is the number of staked Ethereum over time. And the more Ethereum gets locked up, the better it is for the price. The growth stopped in October of last year, but now since February of 2025, we come back up again. We are close to an all-time high in the number of staked ETH. And seeing this number going up is extremely important because the Ethereum chain itself isn't used that much anymore. So Ethereum doesn't get burnt much. Have a look at this. And this is the Ethereum supply over time. Since the merge, so since the move from proof of work to proof of stake, initially the number of Ethereum in circulation went down because Ethereum was used that much that the burning outpaced the inflation caused by staking. But since April of last year, Ethereum itself isn't used that much anymore. It's only the layer 2s. And so Ethereum did become an inflationary asset again. Of course, since the merge, it's still better compared to Bitcoin's inflation. But especially recently, there isn't that much of a delta anymore. This is now the last 30 days. I believe what's currently mainly driving Ethereum's price decline is a deleveraging on the perpetual futures market. So those short-term bets with a lot of leverage on the price. Because have a look at this. This is the open interest on Ethereum. So that's the line in purple versus the Ethereum price. There is a lot of correlation between those two numbers. When there are less bets on the price, the spot market tends to go down. When there's more bets on the price, the spot market tends to go up. And historically, we are still at relatively high levels in leverage. Those long-term trends, as the increase in staking, they are meaningful for the next years. Here's another long-term positive effect. This is the supply absorption through the Bitcoin ETF. That's 2.9% per annum. And for Ethereum, that's larger. It's 3.7% per annum, with a tendency to rather increase. In other words, Wallstreet is finally accumulating Ethereum at a faster pace than Bitcoin. And this could help Ethereum dominance to go up. So Ethereum as a fraction of all of crypto might rise. Let's actually have a look at this. This is the Ethereum dominance. And we bottomed out at a very similar level to September of 2021. This is where we got our recent rally. And now we just had a bit of a retracement. But still, in the grand scheme of things, I think the risk versus the reward for Ethereum doesn't look too bad. Here's a slightly different chart. This is now Ethereum relative to Bitcoin, so a comparison of prices. The bottoms here don't align as well. The arrow over here shows the change from proof of work to proof of stake. And so it seems like a lot of people sold Ethereum once the transition had happened. It was a sell the news event. It seems like all the people that entered the Ethereum ecosystem in the past through the mining, that inflow of new people, that then stopped with the merge. And that probably also contributed to the relative underperformance. But again, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't look like Ethereum is particularly expensive, especially given that within the decentralized finance ecosystem, Ethereum still has 55% of the capital across all chains. In the space of stablecoins, Ethereum has a market cap of 50%. Here's the Ethereum stablecoin market cap over time. We are at very similar levels to DeFi summer. Then came the implosion of FTX and Terra Luna, and then the recovery since October of 2023. So measured in capital, in terms of stablecoins, Ethereum is at a very similar level to February 2022. But the Ethereum dominance since then went down massively by 52%. And so I'm not sure if a price decline like this, historically speaking, is justified. The hard capital that's now on Ethereum is close to all-time highs. The pricing is not. Really, the main reason to be bullish about Ethereum again is the demand by Wall Street. Even the number of Ethereum that's in grayscales ETFs isn't going down anymore. It's slightly going up. When we look at the number of Ethereum across all Ethereum ETFs, that's now at an all-time high. And again, it's growing very, very quickly. The Bitcoin ETF and the Bitcoin treasury companies like Michael Saylor, they caused the massive run in the Bitcoin price. The retail interest for Bitcoin and for crypto is very low, but institutionals are buying. That's what's pushing it all up. For Ethereum, we start to see the same kind of buying as well. And that's why I think it's potentially a good idea to buy this bottom. But then there's potentially an even better opportunity. An opportunity with maybe more risk, but also with more upside. And that is Solana. Because while we have looked at Ethereum dominance and at Ethereum relative to Bitcoin, this here is the Ethereum relative to Solana chart. Ethereum tended to underperform Solana over the last years because of all the meme coin trading that happened on SOL. And we are now medium term on the upper end. So Ethereum could underperform Solana in the next weeks, maybe months. Here's the same chart inverted. So in other words, Solana relative to Ethereum is cheap. It could go up. And we actually did the exact opposite trade in the middle of April of this year. So we bet on falling Solana relative to ETH. Now, I did not talk about this topic on YouTube, but I did talk about it in Premium. So here is that post, April 13th. I'm opening a relative valuation short of Solana relative to Ethereum. Again, this is when the chart just hit the top trading range. Subsequently, we went down. And so that's then how this develops over time. The bet went from 43K to 60K. And that's purely based on the relative valuation. So we're not interested in where crypto as a whole is going. We're only interested in relative valuations. Where is the capital relatively flowing? Those are not necessarily very common bets. Not many people do this, but I believe this is where the real alpha in crypto is. Solana does look like it found a floor. And a Solana ETF might get announced in the next weeks. And then Solana could outperform Ethereum by 40%, potentially even 50%. And the only thing that really matters is that outperformance. It does not matter where Bitcoin is going. It does not matter if both things go up or both things go down. Only the relative ratio between the two. That's the thing we want to bet on. And with those relative valuation bets, the community is already making a lot of money. Here are a few trades that are shared by the community. I've made dedicated videos on how to set this all up as well. So with this relative short over here, I used Venus Finance. We can use Venus Finance. We can use Aave. Any borrowing and lending platform will do. But it's about doing this in a smart way, right? Doing this where the risk is properly hedged. Doing it where we're not that dependent on the overall macro. And so feel free to check it out. It's currently $125 per month. You will lock in that rate. So even when I increase the price in the future, you'll continue to pay the lower rate. Price increases only apply to new joiners. You should find a link directly to Premium over here. Just click on this box. It will lead you to the sign up page. If it's your very first time here, feel free to subscribe. I publish this regularly. A like would be very much appreciated as well. It helps the channel grow. See you next time on YouTube or see you in Premium. Cheers.